What if a single strategic decision could bring America's auto giants to their knees? That happened when Canada retaliated against US tariffs by cutting off vital auto parts, steel, aluminum, wiring harnesses and transmissions, paralyzing Ford, GM, and Stellantis overnight. US factories shut down, costing billions, sending GM stock plummeting by double digits and pushing the economy into chaos. Car prices soared, jobs vanished, and global trade alliances shifted as Canada stood firm. This wasn't just a trade dispute, but an economic war with long-term consequences. How did this bold move reshape North American trade? And what does it mean for your next car purchase? Canada's decision could shake the auto industry. Stay informed, subscribe now, and never miss the truth behind global events. In a bold and calculated response, within days of Canada's retaliatory tariffs, the real cost of the trade war became painfully obvious. Assembly lines across the United States came to a halt, causing huge production delays. Vehicles that were supposed to be delivered were left unfinished, waiting for parts that were no longer available. For consumers, this meant longer wait times for new cars, with dealerships scrambling to meet demand. For automakers like General Motors and Ford, it was a financial disaster, losing millions each day. The North American auto industry, once a model of efficiency, was now exposed as fragile. Smaller suppliers, particularly in the Midwest, faced bankruptcy, while the ripple effect caused massive job losses. Wall Street panicked, and the crisis quickly spread to global markets, leaving uncertainty in its wake. The stock market reacted immediately to the auto industry's crisis, with shares of major US automakers plunging within a week of the trade war's escalation. General Motors' stock tumbled by double digits, while Ford hit its lowest point in 2 years. Analysts quickly downgraded earnings forecasts, warning of long-term financial strain. Investors, already wary due to rising interest rates and global instability, saw the trade war as a tipping point. Hedge funds dumped auto stocks, fearing production shutdowns and soaring costs. In response, automakers considered drastic steps, including plant closures and mass layoffs, to offset mounting losses. Meanwhile, banks braced for a surge in loan defaults, as struggling consumers fell behind on auto payments. The crisis underscored the fragility of the market, leaving both investors and industry leaders scrambling for solutions. As the trade war escalated, American auto factories fell into disarray. What started as minor slowdowns quickly spiraled into full-scale production shutdowns, as major automakers ran out of critical Canadian-supplied parts. The once reliable just-in-time manufacturing system crumbled, unable to function without aluminum, lithium-ion batteries, and semiconductor chips. General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis were hit hardest, forced to indefinitely halt production and furlough thousands of workers. The crisis rippled beyond assembly lines, hammering steel mills, logistics firms, and small parts suppliers, many facing severe financial strain. As banks tightened credit, struggling businesses found it increasingly difficult to stay afloat. With no quick fix in sight, the US auto industry braced for long-term damage, highlighting its deep reliance on cross-border trade. America's workforce is feeling the sting of economic turbulence, with major layoffs shaking industries from tech to manufacturing. Inflation has surged, shrinking paychecks as living costs climb. The Federal Reserve's interest rate hikes have made borrowing tougher, hitting homebuyers and businesses alike. While some companies see record profits, wage growth lags, leaving many struggling. Over 100,000 tech workers lost jobs in 2023, and corporate downsizing continues into 2024. Retail and transportation sectors are also shedding jobs as consumer spending shifts. Meanwhile, small businesses face closures due to higher operating costs. With job security fading, many are left scrambling for stability in an uncertain economy. We hope you're enjoying the content, so make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated. As factories shut down and supply chains collapsed, new car production plummeted, leaving dealerships with record low inventory. With demand outpacing supply, new vehicle prices skyrocketed, increasing by over $5,000 on average. The used car market surged, with prices jumping from $20,000 to over $28,000. In 2023, some models even sold for above MSRP, forcing buyers to reconsider purchases. Rideshare drivers, small business owners, and families struggled to afford reliable transportation. Meanwhile, rental car rates spiked as companies faced their shortages. Although automakers ramped up production in 2024, High interest rates and limited discounts continue to keep affordability out of reach for many. The trade war's impact spread worldwide as Canada's counterstrike reshaped global trade. European automakers like Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz shifted supply chains away from North America, wary of rising instability. Meanwhile, Japanese and South Korean manufacturers seized the opportunity to expand their North American market share. China's electric vehicle sector surged, aggressively positioning itself for global dominance. Mexico, caught between US and Canadian tensions, treaded carefully, fearing economic retaliation. As supply chains realigned, Washington found itself in an unprecedented diplomatic crisis, struggling to maintain trade alliances. What began as a regional dispute rapidly transformed into a global economic shift, leaving the US grappling with diminished influence and a rapidly evolving trade landscape. Canada's bold retaliation shattered the US's reputation as the leader of free trade. Almost immediately, America's allies reconsidered their economic ties, forging new coalitions to counter US influence. The European Union expanded trade agreements with Canada, Mexico, and Japan, while the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership gained momentum. Canada and the EU fast-tracked their trade deal, enabling European automakers to replace US manufacturers in key markets. Latin American nations like Brazil and Argentina ramped up exports to Canada, strengthening economic ties. At the same time, South Korea and Japan moved toward independent trade agreements, reducing reliance on the US. Meanwhile, Canada deepened economic ties with China, signaling a shift in global trade dynamics. As Washington scrambled to regain control, it became clear that Canada's strategic moves had permanently altered the balance of power in international trade. While Washington struggled, Ottawa held its ground. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, backed by strong public support, refused to enter talks until US tariffs were lifted. For Canada, this was about protecting its economy and national sovereignty. Instead of waiting, Canadian businesses adapted, expanding into European and Asian markets, while the energy sector pursued deals with China and Europe. The world took notice. Germany, France, and Japan openly criticized US tariffs, praising Canada's firm stance. At home, workers and unions stood united with the government, reinforcing the country's determination. With its economy proving resilient and new trade partners emerging, Canada flipped the script, forcing Washington to come to the table on Canada's terms. Despite the resolution, trust between the US and Canada remained fractured. American businesses, once heavily dependent on Canadian supply chains, began diversifying production to reduce vulnerability, an ongoing shift. Meanwhile, Canada aggressively expanded its global trade network, strengthening economic ties with Europe, Asia, and South America to create a more resilient economy. The trade war also had lasting political consequences. US voter sentiment shifted, with many questioning Trump's trade policies and their economic fallout. In contrast, Trudeau's firm stance reinforced his leadership, securing Canada's economic independence and reshaping global trade alliances. The crisis ultimately weakened US trade dominance, as nations adjusted to a new economic landscape that no longer revolved around Washington's influence. Ultimately, this wasn't just a trade war, it was a wake-up call. Power shifted, economies suffered, and the auto industry struggled. Canada's bold move shook everything, forcing the US to rethink its strategy. But what's next? Will automakers recover? Will prices climb higher? Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more updates.